Hi team, it's Sam, obviously. I am on here today. I said yesterday, I'm just going to move this mouse. I said yesterday I'm going to come on and talk about energy balance because that was the second most popular topic in the poll. And I'm going to discuss what is energy balance, what does that mean in relation to fat loss, which is most of you guys, it's most of your goal, and how we can manipulate this to help with your results. Also talking about maintenance and what maintenance actually is in relation to you and your body, and how we can find this. Okay, so I've done a nice little graph thing in the back here. So I'm going to run through this as quickly as I can. But if you do jump on this live, obviously I'm going to post it after this, but if you do jump on and if you want to ask any questions, please do so and I'll jump in and go through them with you. I know it's like almost 8:45, so I did want to try and get this thing nice and early, so hopefully some people watch it over their lunch break or even tonight, and if you have any more questions, please jump into the comment box below. Oh, Rob joined. So currently sitting in the office space. Is that office space? I don't know. On the floor, and I'm using our nephew's easel to balance this up. So hopefully it all works out. It doesn't fall over. Anyway, all right. We're coming into energy balance. Let me just move this way towards me. Cool. All right. So energy balance. What is energy balance? So basically energy balance is the equation in relation to calories in versus calories out. So I'm sure all of you know calories. What is a calorie? But basically a calorie is a unit of measure in relation to the body. So energy coming in, energy coming out. Now with that, we know that the energy coming in is done through food or calorically valued drinks or something like that. So I've just written a couple of things there. So obviously think like your normal diet, but don't exclude things like alcohol that contains calories as well. Any kind of soft drinks or anything like that also contain calories. So anything that's actually going to give you some energy as you ingest it. Now your energy output, this is where it becomes a little bit more difficult and probably something that we can't 100% control, but we can do our best in relation to our output by different methods being put in through your training and your overall energy activity throughout the day. So your energy output, and I'm going to jump over here so you can kind of see. So your energy output here is described as your TDEE. So your TDEE stands for total daily energy expenditure, which is basically how many calories you burn every single day to do whatever you need to do. This is very dependent on you and your individual yourself, I guess. So things like your muscle mass, how active you are, your age, your sex, all of those kind of things play a little bit of a part in your TDEE. But I'll just run through, I guess, the basic components of how it is broken up, and then you can have a look at how you can manipulate these a little bit as well. So the biggest factor of your TDEE is your BMI, which stands for your basal metabolic rate. So basically your metabolic rate on how much energy you require at rest. So if you were just laying in bed doing absolutely nothing, then this is how much energy you need to continue doing that. So your muscle mass, your fat mass is going to play a really big role in whether this is higher or lower. And you'll notice that I've just put a percentage, so it usually equates to about 60 to 70% of your total daily energy expenditure. Next one down is your NEAT, which stands for your called non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So put it really plain and simply, basically any kind of non-voluntary movement. So what I'm doing right now, and I'm talking a lot with my hands, I'm expending energy. If I'm very active in my job, but it's non-intentional, it's just a part of my day, then that's a part of my NEAT. Even things like breathing, blinking my eyes, all of those things can play a really big role. And you'll see that it's a pretty big chunk of your total daily energy expenditure, and a lot more than what we actually realize. So this is where when a lot of people talk about getting your steps up or getting some incidental exercise up, so taking the stairs, over the elevator, or walking that extra bus stop length or things like that, can really have a big impact on this number here. Okay, the next one down is your TEF. So this stands for your thermic effect of food, or feeding would be another example of that. So basically this means how much energy your body spends with processing the food on this side to break it down into the mechanisms for you to be functioning. So everything in your body takes energy, requires energy for it to happen. So when you're eating, your food, your macros, protein, carbs, and fats, your body needs to expend energy to actually start to break it down through the digestive system and kind of shove it where it needs to go. Obviously with your carbohydrates, it's turning to glucose into your muscles. Protein helps with resynthesis, so like helping building muscles or like lean muscle tissues. And fats is really, really great for hormonal health and making sure that whole mechanism is working well. And I will be doing different videos on these as well and breaking them down a little bit more, but just like as a really basic. So basically just the energy required to actually break down the food that you're eating, right? And this can be about 5 to 10% of your total daily energy expenditure. And I do have percentages on here and like a little bit of a variance, because it does change depending on what kind of food you're deciding to eat, and I guess how often you're eating as well. So obviously when you're eating smaller portions or bigger portions, it'll take a little bit longer or shorter to break down that particular thing. So snacks versus lunches and stuff like that. So last one here is your EAT, which is your exercise activity thermogenesis, which is pretty much just your training, your everyday training and exercise in relation to cardio or strength. You'll see that this is a pretty low amount compared to what we actually focus on. And for me, myself, when I went through and started learning on these, I was really, really surprised on how little training contributes to this total daily energy expenditure. Doesn't mean that it's not an important or vital role in relation to fat loss or shaping up your body into, the physique that you want, for sure, because you need to have resistance training, and I'll go through that as well. But it's not as big as some of these particular things up the top here. So just thinking that, there's other things that we really need to focus on. So after going through all of this, you've probably heard the old saying, calories in versus calories out in relation to losing weight. It can be that simple. And I think a lot of people, we overanalyze it, make it quite confusing, but it doesn't really need to be. But the basis is you need to sort of understand where your energy balance lies, so then you can make the decision on how your calorie in portion affects your goal that you're going for. Okay, so again, as I said, these can be quite interchangeable, and it's generally not too much that we can not focus on. We can't really modify it in a sense of like, or control it's the right word. Can't really control it in a sense of like, oh, I want this to be 70%, so I'm going to do X. It doesn't really work that way. The body's just going to actually just do what it needs to do for you to survive. So the biggest thing that we need to focus on is what's happening over here in this input. Now, everyone has control of their diet and eating what you need to. This can control what happens in relation to your goal. So when we're talking about energy balance, I want you to think about it like a seesaw. So I've got a little seesaw here. So if your input is lower, so it's down here, and your output is higher, so you're training, you're training really heavy, you're eating really well, you've got your non-exercise thermogenesis up, so you're active throughout the day, little things like taking the stairs, bus stops, all of those kind of things, this is up. This is when this is going to happen. So when the input is lower than the output, this is when you're going to create that calorie deficit and you can start to lose weight or lose fat, right? If it's the opposite way around, so your input is higher than your output, this is when we start to gain. Now, it doesn't always have to be fat that you're gaining, especially if you're in a particularly building phase and your programming is appropriate to what you're trying to do. But basically, you want to still think of that shift in that energy balance that you're creating to make these things happen. The other thing that we need to think about is this maintenance. So if these two are equal, you are relatively going to maintain the same weight, like on average. We do know that daily fluctuations happen, and especially for us lovely females with things like our menstrual cycle, water retention, how much sodium you've eaten, all of those kind of things, bathroom, digestion, stuff like that. It'll kind of change your overall weight on the scales pretty much daily. But on average, if you're seeing that scale go up and up and up over the course of the weeks, we know that you're probably here. If it's going down, you're probably here. If it's relatively staying the same, you're probably here. Right? So I guess the thing that we want to really focus on is making sure that we're in the right energy balance for the goal that you're trying to achieve. Now, like what I said, most of you are wanting to lose body fat, and in order to do that, we need to be in a slight calorie deficit for this to take place. Okay, so talking about that, and we need to find out, okay, what is your maintenance and how can we find your deficit or your surplus in relation to your goal and what you want. So your maintenance calories can changes for every single different person, and I really want to reiterate the fact that it's not a one particular number. There's some more research coming out that it looks like it's a little bit more of a range that you can kind of travel between, mainly because this is all here is quite unpredictable, because sometimes you might be a little bit more active than other days and you don't even realize. For example, my days through the week are super active because I'm out on the gym floor all the time. My weekends are probably a lot less sedentary, so I'm just kind of like sitting around watching TV or doing whatever, so that I know that my output isn't going to exceed my input over the weekend. But over the course of the week, I think I've got a really good grasp of what my maintenance is. So there's a couple of ways that you can find out what your maintenance is. There's a few online calculators and one that I use, as well as like a formula that I've created, which I've showed quite a few of you, is tdeecalculator.net, I believe. I'll find it out and put it in the thing. Anyway, it just asks you a bunch of questions of like how old you are, what your height is, what your sex is, how active you are. And then it will spit out kind of a number based on a few equations that they've trialed and tested. And then you can see, okay, cool, my maintenance is X. it doesn't really take into consideration how much lean muscle tissue you have or fat mass you have. So this is where sometimes they can be really inaccurate. It also doesn't take into consideration any of your previous history in relation to like dieting, yo-yo dieting especially, you know, like have you been having really, really low calories for a long time? All those kind of things, it doesn't really take into account. So this is where they can be a little bit off, but it's great for like a overall, oh shit, this is where I should relatively be. For me, the best way that I like to find maintenance is literally just track your intake. Track what you're ingesting every single meal for a whole week, even 2 weeks. You can get a rough range of how many calories you're consuming throughout those weeks. And if your weight has stayed relatively the same or within sort of like half a kilo over that 2-week period, then you know that the calories that you're consuming over that time is maintaining you for the weight that you're doing. If you're slightly decreased, then you know you're in a slight deficit, so you probably maintenance is slightly higher. If you're slightly increased, so you're like, you know, gaining a kilo in 2 weeks, then you know that your intake is higher than what your output is. All right, so that's probably the best way and probably the most accurate way to find out what you're particularly doing, because as I said, everyone is really, really different, and it depends on your dieting history, training history, all that kind of stuff on where your maintenance should lie. From there, then you can look at, okay, what kind of deficit do I need to get in for my goal? Or what kind of surplus do I need to get in for my goal? So I talk a lot about deficit because most of my clients are wanting to lose fat. So that's kind of where my mind goes. But I have had a couple of guys that have wanted to put on muscle. So obviously increase of food is very, very necessary for that to occur. But yeah, I'm hoping that kind of clears a couple of things up. So when we're thinking a little bit of a recap, calories in versus calories out, it's basically the food that you're ingesting here, the TDEE, which is over here, and then you can determine what kind of sway that you need to go for these to occur here. Okay. The biggest thing that I want to sort of hone in to you guys is tracking your intake over here is going to make a huge difference in finding out where you're at and how many calories your body requires on a daily basis for this to happen here. So when I first started in this industry and first started my journey, I guess, I didn't do any of the tracking. So I know what it's like to be quite nervous about it. It's a whole new skill. It's something that takes time to learn and can be a little bit frustrating at times. I went on the path of the clean eating type protocol. And with that, yeah, I got some results, but I didn't really learn a hell of a lot in relation to what food actually does in my system and how many calories are in things and how I can manipulate this energy balance. I winged it basically. And because I was eating clean, I was cutting out a lot of high calorically valued foods and kind of not really realizing that that's the reason why I probably lost weight, not necessarily because of the deficit that I was in or even learning about the deficit that I was in. And this is why I'm so, I guess, passionate about trying to teach you guys this, because this is a skill that you can really take with you for life, and you can continue to implement this through different stages of life. And the more that you learn about how your body reacts and you can control it a little bit more, you won't need to continually think about dieting all the time, because you'll have that basically nailed. So yeah, I hope this has put a little bit of insight in relation to energy balance, calories in, calories out. Let me know if you have any questions. I am going to do more videos like this so you can understand a little bit more, especially when it comes to the food choices that you're making, how that impacts that TDF, and I guess how training can influence this as well. All right, so hopefully that was good. I'll speak to you soon, and yeah, have a great week, guys.